Hi, hello, and welcome into the Ball Don't Lie podcast, a special edition of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. My name's Austin Elmore, and we're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to throw in a wrinkle to the podcast coverage. We're going to make a podcast every single day from now until the end of Bengals training camp. We're going to preview what might be happening or what could happen or what's coming up. We're going to review what has happened, what might be happening, or anything else that has happened, transpired, could happen, whatever. We're going to cover the whole thing each and every day in a short podcast and a short video posted to social media to talk some Bengals and Bengals training camp. Yesterday was the first day that players were in town, at least the veterans. The rookies reported over the weekend. The veterans reported at Paycor Stadium yesterday. And today is the first official day of Bengals practice. And let's be honest, things are not great in Cincinnati right now. Let's start with the most obvious, the biggest news, the biggest piece, some would say, of this entire puzzle, not named Joe Burrow, and that's Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson has left the state of Ohio and gone back to his home in Florida with his wife because he and the Bengals could not come to an agreement on a contract extension. Now, over the last month or so, there's been a lot of progress made between the Bengals and Trey, but things kind of fell apart following the Bengals media luncheon on Monday and prior to veterans reporting to camp on Tuesday. And on Tuesday morning, Trey posted an Instagram story with a geo tag on it saying that he was back in Florida. He spoke to Diana Rossini of The Athletic that said, "For the last 30 days, I've been in Cincinnati. We've been negotiating, but things fell apart." And basically it comes down to the guaranteed money beyond year number one of the deal. Now, the whole time, this has been about the length of Trey's contract, not necessarily about the money. Well, it seems like the length has been figured out following a contract extension of 3 years by TJ Watt, but the guaranteed money is still an issue for the Bengals. This is not uncommon. This is a common issue for the Bengals. Guaranteeing money past year one is not something they often do, and definitely not something they do for players at the age of 30 and getting older, and that's where Trey is right now. He's going to turn 31 by the end of this season. Now, in and of itself, that's an issue because he's the league leader in sacks for the last 2 years, and even with him last year, your defense was horrible. So how exactly do you get from point A to point B? Point A being the terrible defense last year, and point B being a defense good enough to actually contend for a championship this year. Well, without Trey, that's one problem, and without your first-round pick, that's another. Shamar Stewart, also not in camp, and he posted an Instagram story yesterday in College Station, Texas, still working out with the Texas A&M Aggies and working out on his own and doing whatever he might be doing. There are 257 draft picks from this past draft. 255 of them are signed. One of them is Quinshon Judkins from the Cleveland Browns, and he's dealing with off-field legal issues. And the other is Shamar Stewart, who's dealing with default language in the deal. We've talked about this extensively. By this point, everybody knows what it is and what it means. And I agree with Mike Brown, the Bengals president, who said yesterday, at this point, it's foolishness. It's silliness. And I really do feel bad for Shamar Stewart that his agent and the people around him continue to tell him things that hurt him and try to give him advice. And I give the Bengals credit. Both Duke Tobin and Mike Brown kind of put Zach Hiller, Shamar's agent, in the crosshairs when they met with the media on Tuesday, telling him, listen, man, he's getting bad advice and he's hurting himself and subsequently hurting his football team. And not to mention, he's kind of hurting the people around him as well because he continues to get in the way, Zach Hiller, Shamar's agent, of life-changing money for Shamar Stewart. And this is a common practice, common language in first-round pick deals across the NFL. The Bengals haven't done it before, but that doesn't mean that they can never do it and can never evolve. And when there's more guarantees, which continue to happen over the course of draft picks and contracts and slotted values and signing bonuses, well, then the club's going to look for some more specific language to protect themselves against guaranteed money. Because I don't know if you've heard the news at all, but owners across the NFL have no interest in a lot of guaranteed money. And I can't blame them just from a business perspective. And in the game of football specifically, I can't blame them from being wary of guaranteed money and wanting all the right language in there to protect themselves. So what else, right? Shamar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson. I don't think those two things, either of them, are going to end anytime soon. So now you've got to shift the focus to the guys that are actually here, the guys that are actually playing, the guys that are actually performing. And there is no bigger magnifying glass on any position than the defensive line. You get a chance to see Joseph Osai. You get a chance to see Myles Murphy. Those dudes are going to get serious reps in training camp while Trey and Shamar are out. And that could be a positive. That could be a good thing for this defense, for those guys to get the reps, for those guys to get the development under new defensive line coach Jerry Montgomery. And I think it's becoming a really, really important part of training camp. I think most people feel like the offense and the expectations around the offense are pretty high, and they're going to come in and hit the ground running. The continuity of the offense, the continuity of Dan Pitcher, the biggest change being Frank Pollock, no longer the run game coordinator and offensive line coach. Scott Peters comes in. But with Burrow, with the continuity, I think most people think the offense is going to hit the ground running. And the big question is, how do you improve on a terrible defense? And when your defensive line has two of the guys that you expected to be rushing the passer the most, a first-round pick and your top defensive edge rusher in Trey Hendrickson, you're not going to be able to get to the quarterback as well with a couple of unproven guys in Myles Murphy and Joseph Osai. How does that have a trickle-down effect on the rest of the defense? Most notably, the secondary, which the team did not invest very much money in. As a matter of fact, they took some money away. They asked Geno Stone to take a pay cut. The depth at the safety spot is not ideal. The depth at cornerback is not ideal. Now, the good news is Dax Hill is starting the season good to go. Starting training camp good to go. He's not on the PUP list following his ACL injury a year ago, so Dax is going to be good to go. And Al Golden, the new defensive coordinator, has hinted at the idea that all those guys in the defensive backroom, specifically the corners, are going to move around all around the field. Dax has the versatility and the speed, the athleticism to be able to do that. So too does Cam Taylor-Britt. I'm curious to see what Al Golden cooks up with those two guys specifically and how he uses them in different spots all around the defense. So as we go into week 1 of Bengals training camp, those are the biggest stories for me. How does the defensive line impact the secondary? And how long is it going to take for Trey and Shamar to figure things out? And in the meantime, can Myles Murphy, Joseph Osai, Cam Sample, Raymond Johnson, Cedric Johnson, all those guys on the Bengals defensive line, can they get valuable reps that could eventually lead to impactful depth for the defensive line as the season goes along? I'm not saying those guys not being here could be a positive, but you can't rule it out that those players that are going to be practicing in the meantime are going to get meaningful reps for the Bengals defense between now and then. On top of that, a fast start. That's the number one question that this team faces outside of the contract disputes as they go into 2025. We'll talk about that tomorrow because there's been a massive change to Bengals training camp. We'll talk about all that tomorrow on the Ball Don't Lie podcast. Thank you for listening.